June 5, 1944. Southern England. Just after midnight. Rain presses softly against the windows of a low concrete building, hidden behind hedgerows and blackout curtains. Inside, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and tension. Wall clocks tick in different time zones. Maps cover every surface. Coastlines traced and retraced by weary fingers. In the corner, a radio hums. Steady, alive. Its static broken by bursts of Morse code, clicking into the darkness like a mechanical heartbeat. Beyond these walls, thousands of ships sit motionless on a black sea. Hundreds of thousands of men wait in silence. Weapons cleaned, letters written, boots damp with cold. The largest invasion force in human history is poised to move, but its success depends on more than sheer strength. Far across the channel, German commanders study their own maps with confidence. They are certain they know where the blow will fall. They are prepared for it. They are waiting. What they do not see is a true weapon already inside their defenses, an idea, carefully planted, patiently nurtured, now impossible to ignore. The Trojan horse is no longer outside the gates. By the winter of 1943, the war in Europe had reached a strain that battlefield courage alone could not resolve. Germany remained powerful, still dangerous, but no longer invincible. On the Eastern Front, the Wehrmacht had suffered catastrophic losses at Stalingrad and Kursk. Millions of men had been swallowed by the brutal arithmetic of Soviet warfare. In the Mediterranean, Allied forces had landed in North Africa, pushed through Sicily, forced Italy out of the Axis, and opened a southern front. Yet Western Europe remained locked behind concrete, steel, and ideology. Hitler called it the Atlantic Wall. From the Arctic Circle to the Spanish border, thousands of miles of coastline were fortified with bunkers, gun emplacements, minefields, and beach obstacles. Artillery batteries dominated likely landing zones. Infantry divisions waited, trained to repel invasion at the water's edge. On paper, it was an impenetrable shield. But the wall had a flaw. It was too long to defend everywhere with equal strength. By 1943, the German High Command knew an Allied invasion was inevitable. The question was not if, but where and when. This uncertainty consumed them. The most obvious target was the Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point of the channel, offering the quickest route to Germany's industrial heartland and direct access to major ports. To German logic, it was the only rational choice. That logic hardened into doctrine. Hitler himself fixated on Calais, convinced the Allies would strike where geography favored speed and supply. As a result, the strongest offenses were concentrated there. 15th Army units were ready to repel a landing. Heavy artillery overlooked the straits. Panzer divisions stood nearby, prepared to counterattack once the invasion revealed itself. Normandy, farther west, was considered secondary, dangerous, but unlikely to host a main assault. This assumption would shape everything that followed. For the Allies, planning Operation Overlord revealed a grim reality. Even with air superiority, naval dominance, and overwhelming manpower, a frontal assault against prepared defenses would be catastrophic. Casualty estimates ran into the hundreds of thousands. Surprise was not a luxury. It was essential. Yet surprise alone was impossible. The build-up in Britain was enormous. By early 1944, more than 2 million Allied soldiers were stationed in the United Kingdom. Ports overflowed with ships. Airfields were packed with aircraft. Roads clogged with convoys moving day and night. German reconnaissance aircraft photographed the coast whenever weather allowed. Abwehr agents, though compromised, still reported what they believed to be patterns. The Germans knew an invasion was coming. What they did not know was where to look. This gap between knowledge and certainty became the Allies' most valuable terrain. British intelligence had learned early that secrecy alone was insufficient. Information always leaked. Movements were observed. Patterns detected. Instead of trying to erase these signals, planners began to shape them. If the enemy insisted on watching, they would be shown exactly what the Allies wanted them to see. The foundation had been laid years earlier. By 1941, British counterintelligence had effectively neutralized the German espionage network in the UK. Captured agents were imprisoned or turned. Some became double agents, feeding controlled information back to Berlin. This system, later formalized as the double-cross system, gave the Allies an unprecedented advantage: the ability to speak directly into the enemy's decision-making process. By 1943, that ability was about to be weaponized on a scale never attempted before. The goal was no longer simply to hide a secret. It was to construct a false reality. If the Germans believed the main invasion would strike Calais, every signal, every intercepted message, every photograph movement would confirm it. Slowly, consistently, inevitably, relentlessly, the Allies were preparing not just an army, but a story. And once that story took root inside the German command, it would be harder to dislodge than any concrete bunker or coastal gun. As planners in London and Washington pored over maps and casualty tables, a new understanding emerged. The decisive battlefield might exist entirely inside the enemy's mind. Once that battlefield was chosen, everything else would follow. From this insight came a plan with a deceptively simple name: Operation Bodyguard. Its purpose seemed almost mundane: to ensure that when Allied forces crossed the Channel, German commanders would be looking in the wrong direction. But beneath that simplicity lay the most elaborate deception campaign in history. Bodyguard was not a single trick or feint. It was an architecture of belief. Every Allied movement in Britain, real or fabricated, fed into it. Troop deployments, construction of camps, patterns of radio traffic, even the behavior of soldiers on leave. Nothing was too small to matter. At the operation's core lay a central truth British intelligence had learned early. German commanders trusted consistency more than secrecy. A single contradiction could be dismissed. 1,000 confirming details could not. Operation Bodyguard was coordinated by the London Controlling Section, a small but powerful team reporting directly to the highest levels of Allied command. Their task: weave military intelligence and diplomatic signals into a single, convincing illusion. The story they sought to sell was simple. The main invasion would strike Pas-de-Calais, backed by overwhelming force, after a series of preparatory feints elsewhere. But to make that story believable, it needed actors. One creation was a force that did not exist: the 1st United States Army Group, or FUSAG. On paper, it was the largest, most powerful Allied formation in Britain. Its supposed mission: a direct assault on Calais. Its commander, in German eyes, was General George S. Patton, aggressive, famous, exactly the type of leader expected to spearhead the main invasion. In reality, FUSAG was a phantom. Its units were represented by inflatable tanks, wooden aircraft, and empty camps, carefully arranged for aerial reconnaissance. Vehicles drove in endless loops to kick up dust, suggesting heavy movement. Engineers constructed fake landing craft at a distance, convincing enough for the cameras. Yet the most potent illusion could not be seen. Radio operators transmitted constant streams of fake communications, orders, reports, logistical chatter, following correct procedures, rhythms, and even errors. Morse code clicked day and night, mimicking the heartbeat of a living army. German signals intelligence intercepted every transmission, logging them meticulously. The sheer volume alone suggested massive forces opposite Calais. Radio static became proof. Alongside this technological theater ran a parallel human deception. Double agents, cultivated over years, were activated in earnest. Men trusted by the Abwehr reported troop concentrations in southeast England, landing craft near Dover, and a plan focused on the shortest crossing. These reports were cross-checked against aerial photos and intercepted radio traffic. Everything aligned. Convergence mattered more than any single lie. German intelligence doctrine relied on corroboration. When independent sources agreed, belief hardened into certainty. Even the timing of the real invasion was disguised. Allied bombing campaigns targeted transportation networks across northern France, but strikes near Calais were deliberately intensified. Bridges, rail yards, and roads were smashed repeatedly, reinforcing the impression that this region was the true objective. Normandy was also attacked, but only superficially until the final days. Within the German command, debates persisted, but they narrowed. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt advocated holding armored reserves inland, waiting to see the main blow. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, tasked with defending the coast, argued for immediate counterattack. Both assumed the decisive battle would occur at Calais. By early June 1944, German intelligence saw Normandy as a likely diversion. Dangerous, costly, but ultimately secondary. Even if landings occurred there, they would only draw forces away from the real target further east. The Trojan horse had been accepted, rolled through the gates not by force, but by familiarity. Every intercepted signal, agent report, and photograph strengthened the illusion. By the time Allied troops boarded landing craft for Normandy, the deception no longer needed maintenance. It was self-sustaining. German commanders were not ignorant. They were informed, fatally so. As midnight approached on June 5, 1944, while radios hummed in English bunkers and phantom armies performed their silent dance, the greatest power of the deception became clear. The enemy was waiting for an invasion that would never come. The first battlefield was human, unfolding far from beaches or battlefields. It lived in small rooms behind locked doors, where intelligence officers measured truth in fragments. Men and women trained to distrust certainty now commanded an entire war belief. British handlers monitored their double agents with obsessive care, scrutinizing every phrase, every delay, every apparent mistake. Credibility, they understood, required imperfection. Reports that were too precise raised suspicion. Information that arrived too smoothly felt artificial. Agents were instructed to complain, exaggerate, even be wrong. The Germans did not need brilliance. They needed something recognizably human. For the agents, the pressure was constant. One misjudged detail could unravel the entire illusion. Their words shaped troop movements, dictated orders, and influenced the fate of tens of thousands of men they would never meet. Yet their work remained invisible. No medals would be pinned for convincing an enemy to wait. No monuments would honor a sentence typed in a quiet room. Their battlefield existed entirely inside someone else's mind, and victory meant nothing happening where it was expected to happen. The second angle belonged to the enemy. German intelligence officers were methodical, disciplined, constrained by hierarchy. They assembled reports, compared sources, issued assessments reflecting the best information available. When multiple channels, agents, aerial reconnaissance, radio intercepts, converged on the same conclusion, descent became perilous. Doubt narrowed. The Pas-de-Calais was no longer likely. It became inevitable. That certainty filtered upward. Hitler trusted patterns and intuition, but he trusted consistency more. His belief in a decisive blow at Calais aligned perfectly with the intelligence he received. Orders reflected that belief. Panzer divisions remained poised there. Strategic flexibility gave way to expectation. In trying to anticipate Allied logic, German command surrendered its own freedom of movement. The third angle was moral, and it unsettled even those orchestrating the deception. Lying had always existed in war, but never at this scale. Operation Bodyguard required thousands to act out a falsehood for months. Soldiers trained for combat built fake camps instead of trenches. Radio operators transmitted messages they knew were meaningless. Entire formations existed only to be seen. Yet the arithmetic was clear. If the Germans concentrated their strength away from Normandy, fewer Allied soldiers would be slaughtered on the beaches. Deception became protection. Misleading the enemy saved lives, not by preventing combat, but by shaping where and how it occurred. Truth itself became a weapon withheld until it could do the most good. By early June, these angles converged. Human fallibility, enemy certainty, and moral compromise fused into a single operational reality. The illusion no longer needed constant reinforcement. German command had internalized it. They planned around it. They waited for it. And waiting, the Allies knew, was the most dangerous position of all. The fourth angle was technological, revealing how modern warfare had learned to speak without showing its face. Radio communication, once merely a tool of coordination, had become a signal in itself. German intelligence did not just listen for content. It measured volume, rhythm, and behavior. An army did not need to speak truthfully. It only needed to sound alive. Entire networks were built to generate traffic for units that did not exist. Operators transmitted complaints, logistical requests, and administrative minutiae on strict schedules. The language of bureaucracy became camouflage. To the German listener, The airwaves confirmed what the eye could not fully see. The fifth angle centered on leadership, where reputation became a weapon. George S. Patton's presence in England was deliberate. German respect for his aggressiveness and audacity made him the perfect figurehead for the Phantom Army. Intelligence suggesting that Patton was held in reserve, poised to strike across the Channel, felt logical. Real commanders were where real decisions happened, or so the Germans believed. Meanwhile, Eisenhower's true authority remained understated. Publicly calm, strategically opaque, allowing the illusion to dominate attention while the real command worked quietly elsewhere. Across the Channel, German leadership fractured under the weight of expectation. Rommel pressed for immediate, localized response to any landing, convinced Allied air power would prevent delayed counterattacks. Rundstedt urged patience, insisting the true invasion would reveal itself in time. Hitler, caught between them, centralized authority over armored reserves, trusting the deception without knowing it existed. In believing he was waiting for clarity, he ensured that nothing decisive would move, and the Allies' Phantom Plan thrived. Paralysis. The sixth angle was psychological. Deception succeeded not because it created confusion, but because it created confidence. The German High Command believed it understood the enemy's plan. That belief reduced urgency. Reports from Normandy on June 6 will be filtered through this assumption. Landings that would be seen as diversionary, until proven otherwise. Requests for reinforcements were weighed against the expectation of a larger blow still to come. Psychology completed what technology and planning had begun. The illusion hardened into doctrine. By the time contradictory evidence appeared, it no longer felt decisive. It felt incomplete. The Trojan horse was no longer questioned, because questioning it would require abandoning months of accumulated certainty. As dawn approached on June 6, 1944, Allied radios continued to hum. Morse code tapped steadily into the night, a rhythm the Germans had learned to trust. Across the Channel, real landing craft moved silently through darkness toward real beaches, while imaginary armies remained fixed in the enemy's imagination. The stage was set for the moment when belief would collide with reality. June 6, 1944, 016 hours. The first Allied paratroopers dropped into Normandy under a moonless sky, scattered by cloud and flak. Aircraft engines faded into the distance, leaving men alone in the dark. In fields and flooded lowlands, soldiers gathered themselves, checked weapons, and moved toward objectives memorized in darkness. At nearly the same moment, German radar screens along the coast began to flicker. Blips appeared across a wide front. Reports flowed upward. Airborne landings, naval movements, unusual activity offshore. At German headquarters, the information did not trigger alarm. Landings in Normandy fit the pattern. They were expected, just not decisive. Along the beaches, the invasion unfolded with brutal clarity. At Utah and Omaha, Allied troops pushed through surf and machine gun fire. Losses were heavy. The Atlantic Wall, incomplete though it was, proved deadly where it mattered. Concrete bunkers spat fire. Mines detonated. Every yard was paid for in blood. Yet beyond the immediate front, the German response remained restrained. Requests for armored support moved slowly up the chain of command. Units waited for authorization. That did not come. Panzer divisions held position, not for Normandy, but for the expected strike at Calais. Reports were analyzed, compared, contextualized. The deception demanded patience, and patience had already been learned. German intelligence summaries reflected calm assessment rather than panic. Airborne drops were interpreted as attempts to disrupt communications. Beach landings were categorized as probes. The scale appeared significant, but not conclusive. The absence of a massive follow-up in Pas-de-Calais reinforced a belief that the main invasion had yet to come. Hitler was asleep when the first reports arrived. His staff, bound by protocol and past experience, delayed waking him. When he did issue orders later that morning, they reflected caution. Armor reserves remained centralized. The 15th Army stayed in place. Calais stayed protected. The Trojan horse held. Meanwhile, Allied deception forces continued their performance. Fake radio traffic intensified. Reports from double agents described the Normandy landings as a diversion meant to draw German strength westward. German analysts, already predisposed to believe it, accepted these assessments as confirmation. By midday, the paradox deepened. Evidence of major assault was visible on the beaches, yet German headquarters could not reconcile it with their expectations. The invasion was real, but in their minds it was not yet final. On the beaches, Allied soldiers paid the price of that delay. Every hour bought by deception was measured in lives, yet every hour reduced the chance of catastrophic counterattack. The balance hung in fragile tension, sustained by a lie the enemy still believed. As the sun climbed over Normandy, the invasion that had seemed impossible continued to grow. By afternoon, the contradiction confronting German command could no longer be ignored, but it still could not be resolved. Allied troops were ashore in strength. Beachheads were established. Airborne units, though scattered, were linking up. Supply streams began to flow across the sand. And yet, the long-anticipated strike at Pas-de-Calais had not come. That absence mattered more than the presence of fighting at Normandy. German intelligence officers returned to their maps, searching for confirmation rather than revision. They found it in familiar places. Radio intercepts continued to suggest heavy Allied activity opposite Calais. Double agents reported preparations still underway. Phantom divisions, silent and immobile in reality, remained loudly alive in German assessments. The illusion had outpaced the event. Hitler's control of armored reserves proved decisive. Panzer divisions that could have struck the Normandy beachheads remained immobilized. Some units were ordered to prepare for movement eastward, others to stay on alert. None were released with the urgency the situation demanded. The belief in a second, larger invasion had frozen decision-making at the highest level. Only days later would the cost of that hesitation become unmistakable. As Allied engineers pushed inland and improvised ports from open beaches, operational reality shifted. The Allies had become invisible architects of a battlefield that existed largely inside the mind of the enemy. German forces faced vulnerable intruders expanding by the hour. Counterattacks, when they came, were piecemeal and localized. Without concentrated armor, they lacked the strength to push the invasion back into the sea. Field Marshal Rommel, returning from Germany on June 6th, immediately recognized the danger. He urged rapid commitment of reserves to crush the beachheads before they solidified. His warnings echoed too late. Authority remained centralized. Decisions remained delayed. By the time German command accepted that Normandy was not a diversion, the window had closed. Operation Bodyguard achieved its objective not by hiding the invasion, but by redefining its meaning. The Trojan horse did not conceal soldiers. It concealed intent. German commanders saw the landing and misunderstood its purpose. In doing so, they surrendered the initiative at the moment it mattered most. The illusion began to collapse only after it was no longer needed. By mid-June, the 15th Army remained pinned at Calais, guarding beaches no one would storm. Normandy, once dismissed, had become the center of gravity in Western Europe. The turning point passed quietly, without a single dramatic order or reversal. It passed in the space between belief and action, where certainty delayed response, and delay reshaped history. The aftermath unfolded gradually. Reports accumulated. Reconnaissance confirmed expanding Allied positions. Prisoner interrogations contradicted assumptions. Yet even as evidence mounted, the structural consequences of months of deception could not be undone. For nearly 7 weeks after D-Day, significant German forces remained tied to the Pas-de-Calais. Armored divisions that might have shattered the Normandy bridgehead were withheld, redeployed too late, or committed in fragmented attacks lacking coordination and air cover. The cost of that delay was measurable. By the time German command attempted to concentrate strength, the Allies had landed millions of men, tens of thousands of vehicles, and millions of tons of supplies. Artificial harbors, mulberries, rose from the sea. Fuel pipelines stretched beneath the channel. What had begun as a precarious foothold became an unstoppable flow. Casualties on June 6th and in the following days were severe. Thousands were killed, wounded, or missing. Yet post-war intelligence concluded that losses would have been exponentially higher had German armored reserves struck the beaches within the first 24 or 48 hours. Deception did not eliminate suffering, but it channeled it, constraining where and how it occurred. Every German unit waiting at Calais was a unit not firing into crowded beaches. The psychological impact on German command was profound. Officers trained to trust analytical systems discovered those very systems had been used against them. Intelligence failures were not the result of incompetence. They were the result of manipulation. Operational momentum shifted irreversibly. Once the Allies broke out in Normandy in late July, German forces faced encirclement and retreat. The defeat at Falaise followed. Paris was liberated in August. The Western Front, dormant for 4 years, had returned with overwhelming force. The Trojan horse had opened the gates, and once open, they could not be closed again. In the months that followed, the true scope of the deception emerged. Captured documents, intercepted correspondence, and post-war interrogations revealed how deeply Operation Bodyguard had penetrated German thinking. Intelligence summaries written weeks after D-Day still described Normandy as a secondary effort. Some German commanders believed the main invasion might yet occur as late as July. This persistence was not stubbornness. It was proof of integration. The illusion had become strategy. Operation Bodyguard had not merely misled. It had reshaped expectation. Even as reality contradicted belief, belief retained authority. Post-war Allied assessments treated Bodyguard as a decisive component of victory in Western Europe. British intelligence officials later called it the most effective strategic deception in military history. German officers, including senior figures within the Wehrmacht, acknowledged that the fixation on Pas-de-Calais shaped every critical decision in June 1944. One post-war German report concluded that Allied radio traffic in southeast England was the single most convincing indicator of an impending Calais invasion. It was not the tanks, the camps, or the empty formations that persuaded them. It was the invisible evidence of coordination. The sound of Morse code, constant and unmistakably alive, had been accepted as proof. For the Allies, the lesson extended beyond D-Day. Modern warfare had entered a new era, where perception could outweigh physical strength. Industrial capacity, manpower, and firepower still mattered, but how the enemy perceived them mattered just as much. The battlefield had extended into expectation and belief. Operation Bodyguard reshaped doctrine. Deception was no longer auxiliary. It was operational necessity. Future conflicts would echo this lesson, blending information, technology, and psychology into weapons as decisive as any gun or bomb. As the war ended and Europe lay in ruins, the radios that once carried false orders fell silent. Their work was done. What remained was the outcome they had shaped, a continent liberated not only by force, but by the careful management of truth and illusion. The final meaning of that deception would not be found in documents or after-action reports, but in what it revealed about power itself.